You ever been humiliated in front of your own family and smiled instead of fighting back? They mocked me at the airport check-in, but when I quietly stepped into first class, their laughter stopped. This isn't just a story about revenge. It's about finally walking away, with everything they said I'd never deserve. My name is Alicia. I'm 29 years old, and this is how I turned their betrayal into my blueprint for power. It started in the check-in line at Nashville International. One of those muggy southern mornings when the air feels like syrup and the terminal AC is fighting a losing battle. My blouse clung to my skin. My hair stuck to the back of my neck. The floor beneath the fluorescent lights shimmered with reflections from rolling suitcases and polished shoes. Every few seconds came the thud of a bag being dropped, the shuffle of impatient travelers, the chirp of a scanner beeping someone's boarding pass. The whole airport pulsed with motion, voices overlapping like static. I was standing there with my mother and my sister, luggage handle in one hand, passport in the other. I had booked this trip for us, a small family getaway that was supposed to remind us what we used to be before everything between us turned brittle. I'd spent almost a year saving my PTO, skipping nights out, saying no to new clothes, all so I could pay for this 1 week of peace. A week I imagined might reset things. But as I stood there, wedged between strangers and surrounded by the smell of coffee and jet fuel, I realized peace wasn't what this trip was ever going to bring me. Jenna was already tapping her foot. She always had that restless rhythm in her, the kind that said the world owed her its speed. Her phone was in her hand, screen lighting her face in a cold glow. God, you're so slow, Alicia. We're gonna miss the flight because of you. Her voice carried, sharp and deliberate. A few people ahead turned, pretending not to listen but clearly entertained. A man behind us coughed awkwardly, shifting his bag. I'm literally standing in line like everyone else, I said quietly. She didn't even look at me. Her thumb kept moving across her phone screen, her smirk tightening like she'd just won something. Then Mom's voice joined in, softer but somehow heavier. She's not wrong, you know. You always hold us up somehow. It was like a familiar echo of disappointment, one that had been rehearsed over years. My chest tightened. Because Mom used to be different. She used to defend me. She used to braid my hair before school and tuck folded notes into my lunchbox with words like, "You're brave, my sunshine." Now she just looked at me like I was some unfinished version of a daughter she wished had turned out better. I said nothing. The air around me buzzed with announcements and chatter. A kid cried somewhere near gate C12. I watched the conveyor belt of people ahead inch closer to the counter. Forced myself to breathe evenly, focusing on the cool edge of my passport in my hand. Then my phone vibrated. Just once. A soft buzz that cut through the noise. I glanced down and saw it. A small notification glowing at the top of the screen. Upgrade eligible, first class. Available now. For a second, I thought I'd read it wrong. But there it was. A quiet miracle tucked between text messages and airline ads. My pulse quickened. I looked up. They were still arguing about something. Maybe baggage weight. Maybe breakfast. They hadn't noticed me looking. They never did. That tiny message felt like a secret door opening just for me. All those business flights I'd taken for my job, the late returns, the connections through storms. They had built up this moment without me even realizing it. Miles, status, silent accumulation. And now, while they mocked me for slowing them down, I was holding a key they didn't even know existed. With one tap, I could walk away from their noise, their judgment, their endless disapproval. So I did. I stepped out of the line. Slowly, deliberately. The kind of movement that makes people pause because they can sense something has shifted. I felt eyes on my back as I pulled my suitcase away. The zipper on the floor rasped against tile. Jenna's voice followed, sharp and impatient. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. The ropes that separated the general line from the first-class counter gleamed silver in the light. The sign read, "Priority Access," in crisp blue letters. I walked straight toward it. The woman behind the counter noticed me before I even reached her. Her name tag said Christine, and she had the kind of professional smile that somehow still felt genuine. "Good morning, Miss Taylor," she said, her voice even and warm. "Flying with us today?" "Yes," I said, pulling up the barcode on my phone. "I'd like to upgrade my ticket." She scanned it, and I watched the screen flicker for a moment before a small printer hummed and spat out a fresh ticket. Golden trim, embossed lettering. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Taylor," she said, sliding it across the counter like a gift. "Would you prefer sparkling water or champagne while we finish boarding?" I almost laughed, not from humor, but disbelief. "Champagne, please." The glass was cold against my hand. I took a slow sip, the bubbles crisp against my tongue. For the first time in that noisy terminal, I heard nothing but my own breathing. The crowd faded into a blur of sound and color. Behind me, Jenna's voice was rising again. "Alicia, what is she doing?" Mom turned too, confusion flickering across her face. The same woman who had just scolded me now looked like she didn't recognize me at all. I didn't turn back. There's a power in silence when people expect you to explain yourself. I let them stand there, watching me from the other side of the rope. The line inched forward for them, but not fast enough to erase what they'd just seen. Me, stepping into a world they thought I'd never belong to. Minutes later, when the loudspeaker chimed for boarding, the agent called for Group 1. My name was the first on that list. I rose, smoothed the crease of my pants, lifted my bag with one hand, the champagne glass still in the other. "Wait, how are you boarding first?" Jenna's voice cracked slightly. For the first time that morning, she sounded uncertain. I met her eyes just long enough for her to know I'd heard. Then I looked away. No words, no explanation, just movement. The gate agent smiled as I handed over my new boarding pass. "You're all set, Miss Taylor. Welcome aboard." And just like that, I was gone. The difference between the terminal and the cabin was night and day. The air inside smelled faintly of citrus and leather. The seats were wide enough to cross my legs without brushing anyone. A small screen greeted me by name. A flight attendant handed me a warm towel. I pressed it gently to my wrists, the steam rising like tiny clouds. Outside, through the window, I could see the long line of passengers still waiting. My mother's floral blouse stood out in the crowd, Jenna's ponytail bouncing as she argued with someone near the conveyor belt. They looked smaller from here, distant. The curtain separating first class from the rest of the plane swayed gently each time someone walked by. Beyond it, the noise of boarding, bags clunking, overhead bins slamming, sounded like a different world. I leaned back and closed my eyes for a moment. The engines hummed softly beneath me. The glass beside me caught the sunlight and fractured it into gold. For years, I had been the one waiting. Waiting for approval, waiting for kindness, waiting for someone in my family to notice that I was trying. But here, now, above the noise and the heat, and the looks that told me I was never enough, I realized something quiet but permanent. I didn't have to wait anymore. When the doors closed and the engines roared to life, I looked out the window again. Jenna's seat would be far behind mine, if she even noticed me when she boarded. She'd have her own cramped space, her own little tray table, and she'd wonder how I'd done it. I took another sip of champagne, feeling the cool fizz against my tongue. The flight attendant came by again and smiled. "Would you like a refill before takeoff?" she asked. "Yes, thank you," I said. My voice was calm, steady, unhurried. She poured, the liquid catching the light as it filled the glass. Somewhere behind me, the boarding continued. Luggage thumped into bins. Voices overlapped in frustration. But none of it touched me anymore. I was cocooned in stillness. As the plane began to taxi, I thought of the last time I'd traveled with them. A road trip to Atlanta when I was 15. Jenna had taken the front seat back then, too. She'd controlled the music, the stops, the mood. I'd sat quietly in the back, staring out the window, promising myself that one day I'd be the one steering. It had taken 14 years, but in some small, poetic way, this was that moment. Not revenge, not even triumph, just reclamation. When the plane lifted off, I felt the weight of the ground release me. The clouds spread beneath like an endless sheet of white. I pressed my forehead to the window, watching Nashville shrink until it looked like a memory I no longer needed to keep. The seatbelt sign dinged softly. The flight attendant came through with menus. The woman beside me smiled and said, "First time flying first class?" I smiled back. First time flying without guilt. She laughed softly, not understanding, and turned back to her book. I didn't need her to. Because at 30,000 feet, surrounded by quiet, I realized this was more than an upgrade. It was a beginning. The plane hadn't even left the ground, and I already felt lighter. Not the kind of light that comes from happiness, but the kind that comes when something heavy finally slips off your shoulders. Like shedding a coat you didn't realize was suffocating you until the air hits your skin again. I leaned back into the cool leather, the faint hum of the cabin vibrating through the seat. My champagne glass rested on the armrest, catching the morning sun spilling through the oval window. The light flickered across my fingers like liquid gold. Around me, the cabin was still. Muted conversation, the rustle of magazines, the low, mechanical whir of the ventilation system. Everything was quiet, except my mind. It was strange, sitting there in a place I'd never imagined myself. First class. A world above the world. I thought of all the flights I'd taken before. Cramped seats, middle rows, knees pressed against the tray table. The soft apology of flight attendants brushing by with carts. I'd always looked through the curtain, wondering what it would feel like on the other side. And now I was here, not because someone gave it to me, but because I earned it. Quietly, steadily, without anyone noticing. But I hadn't grown up thinking I'd ever see this kind of comfort. We were economy people. Always. My mother worked at the county clerk's office back in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. A small cubicle with stacks of manila folders, a coffee mug with a fading floral print, and fluorescent lights that hummed above her like tired bees. My father left when I was 9. I still remember the sound of his truck pulling out of the gravel driveway that last morning. Tires crunching, the taillights glowing red through the fog. After that, it was just the three of us. Mom, Jenna, and me. And even then, it always felt like I was the extra one. Jenna had a light that drew everyone in. The kind of charm that got her picked first for everything. Soccer captain, homecoming, college scholarship. Her trophies lined the hallway, polished and proud. Mine were smaller. Participation ribbons, spelling bees, a few certificates that got tucked into drawers. I was quiet, the observer, the one who stayed behind to clean up after everyone else had moved on to the next thing. I learned early that sometimes the only way to survive in a house full of noise was to become silence itself. When I got my first job, tech support for a software firm in Nashville, I thought maybe things would shift. I was flying out for clients, traveling to Austin, Denver, Dallas. For me, it felt big. I was solving problems that mattered, keeping networks alive. But when I tried to explain it at home, they still treated me like I was working at a front desk. Mom once said while folding laundry, "It's nice you get to travel, but it's not like you're doing anything important. I'd laughed, pretending it didn't sting. I told myself she didn't mean it that way, but her tone had lodged itself under my ribs, and it stayed there, quiet and heavy. The day I booked this trip, I thought maybe I could fix it. That maybe, if I gave us something beautiful, a girls' weekend by the ocean, spa days, wine, sunsets, we might find our way back. I didn't even tell them how much it cost. I just smiled and said it was my treat. My way of saying, we're still family, but even generosity can't fix what people refuse to see. By the time I drained the last of my champagne, a woman slipped into the seat beside me. She moved with that calm efficiency that comes from knowing you belong in spaces like this. Late 50s, silver-streaked hair perfectly styled, navy blazer pressed crisp, a strand of pearls resting just above her collarbone. Her perfume was subtle, something floral but expensive, the kind that lingers softly in the air. She glanced at me with a kind smile. Rough morning? I smiled back without turning. Family drama. Loud check-in line. Champagne helps. She laughed, low and warm. It always does. The flight attendants began their quiet choreography. Menus offered like invitations, napkins folded with precision. The woman ordered salmon. I picked the pasta, though I wasn't really hungry. It just felt nice to choose something that wasn't rushed or judged. For a while, we both sat in companionable silence. The cabin dimmed slightly as the sun climbed higher. Outside, the tarmac shimmered in the heat, the edges of the runway blurring. 30 minutes into the flight, I saw her. Jenna. She was pushing through the aisle curtain, headed toward the lavatory. The harsh cabin light made her look different. Smaller somehow. The swagger she'd carried that morning was gone. Her hoodie was creased, her earbuds tangled. She didn't see me. Or maybe she did and decided to pretend she didn't. Either way, I watched her pass. Her face drawn tight, her lips pressed together like she was holding back frustration. For a brief second, a part of me, the younger version that used to chase her approval, wanted to wave, to offer an olive branch, or at least a nod that said, "I'm still your sister." But then I looked around. The space, the calm, the quiet dignity of it all, and realized that I didn't owe anyone a peace offering. Not this time. The woman beside me noticed my eyes following Jenna. "That her?" she asked gently. I nodded. "My sister. She embarrassed me earlier, in front of everyone." The woman gave a small, knowing smile. "And now you're in first class. Looks like you turned out just fine." Her words landed softly, but they stayed, like a balm over something raw. "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "I think I did." We didn't speak after that, and yet, that silence felt fuller than most conversations I'd had in years. It wasn't awkward or strained. It was the kind of silence that heals. When the plane finally descended into San Diego, the sunlight tilted golden through the window. The ocean stretched below, endless and glittering. For a moment, I forgot about everything else. The arguments, the disappointment. Just sky, water, light. When we touched down, I didn't rush to grab my bag. I let the other passengers from first class gather their things, exchange polite farewells, and shuffle down the aisle. I sat for one more breath, feeling the seat beneath me, the hum fading from the floor. Then I stood, straightened my jacket, took my time. The terminal was bright, echoing with the sound of luggage wheels and overlapping voices. I spotted them near the baggage carousel. Mom was scrolling through her phone, Jenna beside her, arms crossed. They both looked up at the same moment. Their eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, everything froze. Then their faces hardened. A flicker of recognition, embarrassment, denial. And then, as if on cue, they turned away. I didn't stop. I didn't wave. I didn't say a word. I just rolled my suitcase past them, the wheels clicking softly against the polished floor. The air outside the terminal was warm, filled with the scent of salt and car exhaust. I called an Uber. A black sedan pulled up, the driver stepping out to help with my luggage. I thanked him quietly and slid into the back seat. The drive to the hotel was lined with palm trees bending in the breeze. The city unfolded in slow rhythm, surfers carrying boards across crosswalks, couples holding iced coffees, sunlight bouncing off glass towers. I rolled down the window slightly. The air smelled like sea spray and citrus. When we reached the hotel, the sign read Ocean Crest Resort. The building gleamed white against the blue sky. Inside, the marble lobby was cool and fragrant with orchids. The receptionist smiled as I approached the counter. "Good afternoon. Checking in?" she asked. "Yes, under Alicia Taylor. Ocean View." Her fingers danced across the keyboard. "Of course. Room 1502. And I see 2 additional guests listed. Please remove them," I said gently. "It'll just be me." She paused for a fraction of a second, then nodded. "Of course. Done." Her professionalism didn't falter, but I caught the faintest flicker of curiosity in her eyes. She didn't ask, and I didn't explain. The elevator ride up was silent except for the soft music playing. Something instrumental, waves and piano notes blending. The numbers climbed slowly. 9, 10, 11, 12, 15. When the doors opened, the hallway stretched ahead, carpeted in blue and cream. I wheeled my bag to the door labeled 1502. The keycard light blinked green. The room smelled like salt and clean linen. A single king bed, crisp white sheets tucked tight. Floor-to-ceiling windows let the light pour in. The balcony doors were open, curtains fluttering in the breeze. I slipped off my shoes, stepped out onto the balcony, and felt the wooden planks warm under my feet. The ocean was there, vast, endless, breathing. Waves crashed in slow rhythm against the shore. Gulls dipped and circled above. I closed my eyes and let the wind pull through my hair. For the first time in years, there was no one waiting for me to explain myself. No one to shrink for. No one to apologize to. This wasn't revenge. It wasn't even defiance. It was release. Release from being the afterthought, the burden, the one always trying to keep the peace while carrying everyone else's disappointment. They mocked me at check-in, but I didn't need to fight back. I just let the boarding group speak for me. I didn't hear from them the entire first day. No text. No knock on my door. No passive-aggressive emoji-laced group chat messages. Just silence. And somehow, that silence felt louder than anything they could have said. It filled the room, pressed against the windows, hummed in the air conditioner's low rattle. I kept expecting a vibration from my phone, a message lighting up the screen, but nothing came. And with every quiet minute that passed, I felt the tension inside me loosen another inch. That afternoon, I walked down to Seaport Village. The air was heavy with salt and sugar, caramel corn popping from a street stand, the tang of ocean mist drifting off the bay. Families meandered between souvenir shops, children clutching melted ice cream cones, a bubble artist sending translucent spheres into the wind. I walked without a plan, just letting my feet move where they wanted. I bought myself a navy hoodie that said San Diego in white block letters across the chest. It was soft and oversized, the kind of thing I'd normally think twice about buying because someone might call it unnecessary. But now it felt like claiming something, a small reminder that I didn't need permission anymore. By the harbor, I stopped to watch the seals flop lazily onto the rocks. Their bodies glistened under the afternoon sun, sleek and effortless. They didn't care who was watching. A crowd gathered. Nearby, phones up, laughter spilling over. I stayed back, content just to observe. Further down, a street performer played a violin cover of Perfect by Ed Sheeran. The notes floated over the water, soft and tender. A couple started dancing, badly, offbeat, but smiling like the rest of the world had disappeared. I found myself smiling too, not at them, but at the simple, undeniable joy of people who weren't performing for approval. Something in me shifted then. It wasn't dramatic. No lightning bolt. No revelation. Just a slow unraveling. Like a knot I'd been tightening for years had finally begun to come undone. When I returned to the hotel that evening, the sky was painted in streaks of pink and orange. I ordered room service, grilled shrimp and lemonade, and ate it barefoot on the balcony while the waves whispered below. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was missing out on something happening elsewhere. This was the something. The next morning, my phone buzzed. Jenna, we're gonna do brunch at that place you found, 11 a.m. You coming? No apology, no warmth, just expectation, as if the previous morning at the airport had never happened, as if humiliation could be reset with a single text. I stared at the message. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. The polite part of me, the one trained to keep the peace, to make things easy, almost typed, sure. See you there. Almost. Then I set the phone face down on the nightstand, watched the light fade from the screen. For a few seconds, guilt flickered. The old kind, the one that whispered be the bigger person. But then I remembered how it felt at that check-in line, how their voices had sliced through me like open ridicule, and how I'd said nothing. So I made a different choice. I picked up the hotel phone and called the front desk. Hi, I said, my voice steady. I'd like to schedule the full spa package today. Facial, massage, everything. The clerk's tone brightened instantly. Absolutely, Miss Taylor. Would you like a glass of Prosecco while you wait? Yes, I said, smiling. And can you hold all calls to my room today? Of course. Enjoy your morning. And I did. The spa smelled like eucalyptus and lavender, warm mist curling through the air. The walls glowed with dim amber light, and soft instrumental music floated through hidden speakers. I slipped into a robe, the cotton plush against my skin, and let them lead me to a private room. The massage started slow, firm palms pressing the tension out of my shoulders, heat radiating from smooth stones placed along my spine. For an hour, I didn't think about family, or guilt, or explanations. Just the rhythm of breath, the sound of water trickling somewhere beyond the door. Afterward, my body felt weightless, my mind quiet, the kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission to exist. When I got back to my room, sunlight streamed in through the sheer curtains. A folded note waited on the floor, slipped under the door. My name scrawled in familiar handwriting, Jenna. I picked it up, already sensing the tone before I opened it. 3 lines. We're leaving early. Mom doesn't feel great. Guess it wasn't the trip we expected. Hope you had fun playing first class. I read it twice. The words sat flat on the page, brittle and self-protective. There was no apology hidden between the lines, just resentment disguised as detachment. I tore it in half, quietly, each rip deliberate. The sound was small, but final. I dropped the pieces into the bathroom trash, washed my hands, and exhaled. Not out of anger, out of release. That afternoon, I watched from the balcony as the sun dipped low over the ocean. Somewhere in the city, they were probably already at the airport, maybe complaining about delays, maybe scrolling through photos that would never include me. I didn't feel the urge to follow. They left. I stayed. 3 more days. I walked through La Jolla Cove, the cliffs glowing gold in the late light. 8 lobster rolls so expensive I almost laughed at myself, but every bite tasted like freedom. I sat by the pool with a paperback, the scent of sunscreen and sea salt mixing in the air. For hours, no one told me to hurry, to move, to fix anything. I was just there. On the second evening, I went down to the shore and let the waves rush over my feet. The water was cold, biting, but it made me feel awake. I watched the tide pull back, carving patterns into the sand. It struck me how easily nature lets go. Waves don't cling to the shore. They return when they're ready. The day before I flew home, I booked another trip. Just for me. A quiet cabin in Oregon, a writing retreat I'd read about once but never dared to apply for. I clicked confirm reservation without hesitation. No shared calendar invites, no group chats, no compromise itinerary. Just me. It wasn't about proving anything to them anymore. I wasn't trying to show them I could stand on my own. I already knew that. It was about no longer shrinking my life to fit the corners of someone else's comfort. When I arrived at the airport for my return flight, the check-in agent smiled and handed me a ticket with a familiar shimmer along the edges. "Miss Taylor," she said, "you've been upgraded to first class again." I smiled back. "Of course I have. Seat 3A. Same soft leather, same quiet hum, same calm." As the plane lifted through the clouds, I looked out the window and saw the ocean shrinking beneath me, blue turning to silver, then to mist. Somewhere below, my family's stories still ran the same loops they always had. Blame, pride, deflection. But I wasn't in that orbit anymore. They used to call me slow, said I ruined things, held everyone up. But the truth was simpler. I just stopped running toward people who never turned around to meet me halfway. All I did was remove myself from a story that was never written for me to thrive in. I didn't ruin her. I just stopped protecting her from consequences. And I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just won. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.